Today we'll be meeting Christy Saylor, a deaf and hard of hearing teacher who's been teaching for over 14 years. Hi Christy, thanks for taking your time to share with us your experience as a deaf and hard of hearing teacher.
It's my pleasure, Gloria. I'm happy to be here.
Are there different names or acronyms for your discipline?
There's really just the one. We're labeled as DHH teachers, DHH standing for deaf and hard of hearing. Currently, I work as a DHH itinerant teacher, which means I don't work in a classroom. Instead, I travel around to different schools to consult with people and work with students in other classrooms.
Can you describe your role and responsibilities when serving students who are deaf-blind?
Typically, I see my role as being somebody who acts as sort of a facilitator or a guide and a resource, because oftentimes when a teacher gets a student who's deaf-blind, they really feel lost. So if I can kind of guide them, so I see that as kind of my major role. Responsibilities are to observe the child, to work with the student, to model for the teacher, to really almost serve like team teaching in a sense, and all of the things that kind of go along with that. You know, just making sure they have the resources that they need, giving them feedback, that sort of thing.
What is unique about your discipline as compared to other related disciplines?
My discipline really looks at what you might say the gestalt of communication and how deafness, varying degrees of deafness, can impact a child's ability to communicate, to develop connections with other people. If you compare that, say, to an audiologist or to, for example, speech and language therapists, those are the two people mix us up the most with. An audiologist really does the hearing testing. We don't do that. They make the recommendations for an FM or a hearing aid. They work, if the child has a cochlear implant, they work with that team on a more technical level. I can do a little troubleshooting with equipment, but I don't have that kind of training. I can understand an audiogram and explain it perhaps to a teacher or a parent, but I don't have that same level of training that an audiologist has. I'm more the teacher. Speech and language therapists, they all work on the speech, like the actual articulation, how they form words, you know, how they pronounce words, that sort of thing. And they'll also work on language, you know, how they use language, the syntax and so forth of grammar. And I do some of that, so I have a little bit overlap, but I really tend to look more at the bigger picture. You know, how is their deafness impacting how they're communicating with others and how others are communicating with them? How does it impact how they get information, you know, and how they give information to other people? So I overlap a teeny bit with these two disciplines. I'm really more a teacher, just with that little bit of a specialty.
What knowledge and skills do you think you bring to a student's educational team?
As a deaf and hard of hearing teacher, I have a lot of training in first and second language learning. We all do. You know, how do children who are deaf learn their first language? What about children who are hard of hearing? You know, and then what about that second language piece? You know, so a lot of people who are in typical bilingual education know a lot about first and second language learning, but people who don't have that training don't tend to. So those of us who are deaf and hard of hearing teachers know a lot about that, and how also language and cognitive development they overlap with each other. You can't have one without the other. We are trained observers in how children communicate. Watching, for example, body language. I watched the other day a little boy doing classic, how do I communicate before I have language? You know, doing the eye gaze, moving his body, pointing, things that a lot of people don't pick up on. We do, and so we bring that to people's attention. We can then talk to speech and language therapists kind of in their own language, so to speak. We can talk to audiologists in their own language. We can help teachers know how to talk to audiologists and speech and language therapists. We can also help teachers sort out a child's behavior in terms of, is it based, in quotes, on their deafness? A lot of times teachers say, well, this child behaves this way, that's kind of odd, and they think that it's just due to being deaf or hard of hearing, and we can say, no, not really. and help them see that. And when their behavior is related to that, we can say, here's what might be happening. We can help them realize that if you're moving around the room a lot, kids are having a hard time following what's going on. We can help them understand maybe why some kid is staring off into space, because they're just not hearing what's going on. They're bored now. Arranging the classroom in certain ways that help children. Things like that we notice that other people don't.